Hey guys, thank you so much for tuning in to Season 2, Episode 2 of the Straight Outta Prison podcast. My name is James K. Jones, and this is my story.
And I am Haley Jones, and this is his story that has now become a part of my story.
So we ended the last one. I got out of prison in Florida. I came to Montgomery County, a hellish travel. Getting there took me 3 or 4 days. Rode through my hometown, sitting at a red light. I couldn't see it, but I knew my mama's house was on the other side of those trees. And just coming to the end of myself, just like, I'm just ready to die.
Well, and then you got there and felt like you got an injection of hope seeing that you had bond, which meant that you could potentially get out. Not forever, maybe. I mean, but even just the thought for you of getting out for a day was
yeah, anything
crazy.
Like, I could go home, and that like the way that like shot me up in my emotions, like. Because if you remember, talking about all my other county jail experiences, I always had a HWOB, which meant hold without bond. And here in Montgomery County, they gave me a $10,000 bond, which meant, I mean, anybody in my family could have posted a bond for that. So that euphoric, like, rise of, like, I'm going home, and then setting it up and getting ready to go, and then the total, like, downer of realizing that I had charges all over Alabama, and the sheriff in Russell County advising my aunt, like, there's no reason to bond him out, because if you get him out now, he's going to go somewhere else, and it's just going to be a endless cycle. You might as well just let him sit there. And then just that hopeless, like, feeling that led me to doing something else.
Well, and I've heard it said that when your highest of high meets your lowest of low. So that's why some people avoid emotion, because you don't want to get too excited and happy, because then you're going to crash, or the opposite. So for you, that was true. I mean, just that height of hope, only to bring it down to the lowest of low, because you had experienced the high, was devastating.
And the low that I experienced after that was, you know, at this time I'd been locked up for 3 years and 6 months, but I had never been locked up under the conditions that I was locked up under. This was a nasty place I was in.
Oh, yeah, because you said it was not as well kept as the Florida prisons or jails.
Well, in Florida, they had it was like they had rules. They had to take care of you. They had to feed you. They had to make sure you had a bed. In Alabama, they didn't seem to have any of these rules.
Right, so you ended up in a room with 50 guys with a mat on the floor.
It was actually closer to 60, but it was a cell block that was designed for, I think it was 18 men was the design.
Okay.
So there were 2 toilets, 2 sinks, 2 showers.
For 50 to 60 men.
It was over 50. It was closer to 60 men that was in there.
So you were sleeping on a mat on the floor under the stairs in this I mean, what you said last time really stuck with me, is that just the smell of that many men in a prison.
Disgusting.
And we're in Alabama, and there was no air conditioning.
I think they had AC, but this was July. They didn't really run it
Okay.
It's not like, you know, how you put our air on 66 and I tell you to stop and put on 70.
68 when 68. We're sleeping.
Whatever.
Yes.
I just know it runs the power bill up. But they didn't do that there. But even if they had it set on 50, you know, you squish like 60 people into a little confinement like that, it is it's a recipe for disaster. There was just the tension. You could cut it with a knife. There was a lot of gang activity and gang members in there. And honestly, I'd never seen anything like that. In Florida, you didn't really see it. I mean, I guess there were gangs, but the camp that I was at, I never saw gangs. I just saw like homeboys. Like if you were from Jacksonville, you know, you hung together. If you were from Dade County, which was Miami, or Broward County, which was Fort Lauderdale, those guys kind of hung together. But I never really saw the gang stuff like I saw in Montgomery. And it was terrifying. Just my first couple hours in there, I saw a guy get beat down and his face split open just for no reason, just because he disrespected somebody. Mm-hmm. So it was a pretty disgusting place to be. But then we talked about in the last one, the thing that would never happen to me happened. I had to come to Jesus.
A literal come to Jesus.
No, it was real.
Or maybe Jesus came to you.
Well, looking back on it now, I know that God had been chasing me for years, and I even believed my whole life, like he's had his hand on me. But at that time, I didn't believe in any of that stuff. I didn't believe in any of the get saved or any of that stuff.
Yeah, because you had said in the end of the last season about your soul awakening in Florida before you left.
That was more of a, like if you use like the literal terms now, I think I went from being an atheist, because I was a stone cold atheist. Like I have no problem knowing that. Like I knew there was nothing else but me and what I could get away with. But I came to, it was John Wesley, who defined it as a soul awakening moment. And he was in the 1800s. He was, I mean, I've studied all his writings and stuff. Like I really admire him. He was a guy that grew up religious. He was in England. He was an Anglican, and so which was would be our American version of an Episcopalian. Mm-hmm. He did all the rituals, did all the things, had all the religion, but he was missing something. So he went on a missionary journey to the colony of Georgia. And the thing that they were supposed to do during those times was to make the Indians become believers. But the way that they would make the Indians believe in Jesus was to pull a gun on them and say, confess Christ or die. So they were like, I love Jesus.
I think I would
praise the Jesus.
Do what they were telling me to do.
So, but he did two or three, I can't remember. He did, I know at least two, like missionary journeys to Georgia. And his last one, he was so frustrated with his life and his faith and the church and all things. And he was on a ship going back to England, and he heard a small group of, I think they were called Moravians. I don't know the significance of that. I just remember the name. But they were like not part of the big church. Like they were just a small group of Jesus followers. And he heard them singing a song on the ship about the blood of Jesus and salvation. And there was something in him that just came alive where he was like, whatever they have, I need to have that because I have religion, and I think he was like confirmed in the church and had all the, robes and rings and sandals or whatever they gave him in those days. But he knew that something wasn't right, and he came to a soul awakening moment, which led to a genuine salvation experience with him where he met Jesus through his spirit face to face, and it changed his life. And then he went back to England and started preaching, and they kicked him out of the church and told him, we don't want to hear all that. But he knew what he had was real, and he kept at it. And, his influence, his writings, I guess the churches he started, that's flooded the world up to this day. And that was kind of what happened to me. I was not religious, wasn't looking for religion, and, 24 years in, I'm still not looking for a religion. What I experienced in that dirty little jail cell was Jesus Christ, through his Spirit, coming to me, telling me, all you got to do is give up and ask me to come in, and then just trust me. Come to me, I got you, just trust me. And, I came to the end of that long night where I surrendered, and I gave up, and I said, I give up. Come in. And he did. And when he did, my heart was changed. And I don't even like to say my heart was changed. It was like there was something inside of me that had been dead all my life that came alive in that time. And I knew it. I knew it as much as I know that my hands are on the end of my arms, and nobody could take that from me. And it changed everything about me from that day forward.
It's kind of neat because as you describe that, and as we've been talking about even outside of this podcast, is hearing your story. This is the first time I've heard it chronologically in this much detail, but hearing the details of who you were and how you behaved and just kind of some of the things that you did. You're the same person then when you were a criminal that you are now, as far as like the gifts that you have and but you're also completely different because of the heart change.
Well,
I guess
the way I see it, like God creates us, like we're created, like no matter what your belief is, we are fearfully and wonderfully made, and we are the capstone of his creation. So any creation that you could look at and say, ooh, look at that, mountain or, the universe or Jupiter or Mars, we are, according to the scripture, we're the capstone of that. We're the top of that. Like we are the pinnacle of creation. And he actually breathes a part of us a part of himself in us, because whether we ever come to him or not, it is clear that we are created in the image of God. So that just in and of itself is a fascinating thing. And I believe that your personality, like who you are and your gifts and talents, are how you're born. Now, whether you're ever like redeemed or come to Jesus and get that salvation and he's able to activate all that stuff, is regardless, you're going to be who you are. I mean, Jesus never said, I don't want you to be who you are. I just want to change your heart and your motivations and give you my spirit and put myself in you so I can live through you.
Yeah. It's neat. I mean, from my perspective, to hear your story and then as to know you as intimately as I do now, and to be able to see and feel the things that are the same and the things that are totally different. So you got saved. I liked how you...
I still don't like using that vernacular.
I know, but you said that last time.
Even though the Bible says that, it's like so many people have like taken that and abused it so much.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't even really call myself Christian. I call myself a follower of Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, even though, I am a Christian.
So the part of you that was dead came alive because you asked Jesus to come in, right?
Yes, and then but the next day, I mean, my circumstances did not change.
Well, that was my question. So you woke up. First you said you slept better. You don't even know how you slept because you had the best sleep of your life.
That first night, yes, it was like I woke up thinking, how did I ever sleep without you?
Right.
And plus, I was in a violent place where somebody could have stomped my eyes out while I was asleep.
Right.
And it was, that was a reality. And the correctional officer, the police there, they didn't care. I mean, I guess they care. I shouldn't say they didn't care. But they didn't really do anything about the gang stuff. Like if somebody got beat down like that, they wouldn't even address it. They would just take the person out and, tend to their wounds and move on.
So you woke up the next morning, then what?
It was crazy. I was full of life, and it was a life that I'd never experienced before. It was a peace that I'd never experienced, a joy that I'd never experienced before. And don't get me wrong, nobody wants to be locked up in jail or prison. We were not created for that. But there was something about that next day. I was changed. I was different. Now, I did have this, I don't know if it was weird or it was just how the way I grew up. I felt like I had this understanding with Jesus, like, surely you're not asking me to go to church. Like, I'm not going to do church and, put on the pleated khaki pants and tuck my shirt in and put a tie on. Like, I'm not going to do all that. Waking up that next day, I felt like I need to make this, like, official. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. And I don't even know why I thought that. I just knew, okay, this was me and Jesus. This thing happened. Like, I need to make it official.
Well, it's like anything else. I think we instinctively, if something big happens and something big has happened, you almost need to like confirm it.
Yeah, and I didn't even really know how.
Yeah.
But I knew they had chapel call. I'd heard them. And so I said, next time they say chapel call, I'm going to go chapel call. So I think it was the second or third day they did a chapel call and I was first in line. And I marched myself down to the little chapel, and there might have been 10 or 12 guys there. I didn't know what I was doing, but I felt like I needed to, make it official. So I just went, sat through the little service they did, and then explained to the chaplain, what I felt like happened to me. And he was like, well, son, you've experienced salvation, but to make it real, the scripture is clear. You have to do a public profession of faith. And so I was like, well, what does that mean? And he said, well, you got to stand up in front of everybody and confess Jesus as Lord. So I was like, okay, well, what do we need to do to make that happen? And so he gave me like this little piece of paper, and I stood up and said, I believe that Jesus Christ is the Son of God. I believe that God raised him from the dead. I ask him to come into my heart, and I make him Lord of my life. And then he said, you're saved. So I was like, okay, I mean, you say that, but what happened to me 2 days ago in the jail cell kind of pales in comparison to this little checkbox or whatever.
Okay, so did you think that at the time? I know you think that now, but was that the thought that came into your mind at
Absolutely.
the time?
I mean, I felt like, okay, we're doing the religious thing, and I don't really want anything to do with that. I mean, I'll do it because I feel like I'm supposed to. And I've been reading the Bible for like 2 days by then. I was a Bible scholar already. No, I'm not. I needed some guidance. I needed some input. I needed to know what to do next. And he told me that was what I was supposed to do. And in those days, I despised standing up in front of people and talking. I couldn't stand it. But that was what I was supposed to do, so that was what I did. I just sucked it up and did it. And then he said, and this was a sweet man. He was a good man. I would get to like him better over the next 6 months while I was there. He said, well, son, have you been baptized? And I said, no. And so he like pulled me off from everybody else, and he was like, come back here. And he took me into this little jailhouse / prison bathroom. And it was like a little 100 square feet, a little metal toilet, and then one of those metal sinks, a little mirror. And he said, well, I'm going to baptize you in here. And I was like, okay, but, I thought you like dunked you or whatever. Because I'd seen people get baptized before. I never really knew what it meant. He like grabbed me up and he said, son, don't worry about how we're doing it. God meets us where we're at. And he's meeting us here today. And he said, do you believe that Jesus Christ is the Son of God? And I said, yes. He said, do you believe that he died for your sins and that God raised him from the dead? And I said, yes. And he said, all right, I want you to put your head over the little sink. And then he filled his hands up with water. And he said, because of your confession of faith, I baptize you in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit. And he like had a handful of water and he like splashed it on my head. And it was just the weirdest like feeling of like, what are you doing? Like I felt so awkward. I'm half wet. Like if you're all the way wet, you feel some kind of way. But if you're just like half wet, you feel just awkward. And I had on my little orange prison suit, and I was, head was wet, dripping down on me. And then he like grabbed me up in a bear hug and was like, everything's going to be better now. And I just remember thinking, how? Was anything, I understand it now, but I didn't understand it then. Like whatever you thinking you like put me over a prison sink and wet my head is going to do really like paled in comparison to what happened to me, 3 days prior in that nasty jail cell. So then what happened next was, even though I was like anti-church, every time they called chapel, I felt like I needed to go because I had like this, I want to make sure. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. And then...
Was there a feeling of like you didn't want to lose what happened, or...
Yeah. I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't have like any guidance, and he didn't give me any guidance except for to say a confession of faith, and then he was going to wet my head and baptize me. And then prison or jail like services that you go to is they're all like salvation oriented. So all they're going to talk about is you need Jesus, you need Jesus, you need Jesus. And, they'll get to the end of every one of those, and then they will say, bow your head, close your eyes, raise your hand if you need to be saved, then come up front and we'll do the prayer. So every time I went, I would do it again. I didn't know. I was trying to make sure it took.
Well, it's fun. Make sure it took. And it's funny, like, knowing you like I do, I know that you probably were just really wanting, like, okay, like you have already said, what do I do now? Give me some next steps. Like, give me something to do. Obviously, something happened, and now I feel like I need to do the next thing.
Well, I didn't know. Like, I grew up, like, my Meemaw was very religious as far as Free Will Baptist, and she was a good person, and she loved Jesus. Like, remember me telling you, like, that they told me at youth camp that she was sinning because she dipped snuff?
Oh, yeah.
And I remember going home after that and her telling me, and she said, Sonny boy, I just need to tell you, the Lord gives us a conscience, and I have begged the Lord to take the snuff from me, but he hadn't took it from me, so he's okay with it, so I'm going to dip my snuff. But it made sense. It was like, well, if God don't want you to do it, I guess he would help you. And he didn't help her not dip snuff.
Yeah.
But there was some of that. That was the only, like, frame of reference I had for any kind of, like, spiritual anything. That was my only thing. On my dad's side of the family, my granny and my grandfather, they only went to church like if somebody got married, if somebody died, and then like Easter. Like we didn't even go on Christmas. It was not a lot of, and later on I'd understand she got hurt really bad by the church when she was young, And, she had to come to Jesus when she was 88 years old, right before she died, which was beautiful. But I didn't know. I didn't know what I was doing. Like, anyways, this chaplain, this jail chaplain in Montgomery, he got aggravated with me. And he was like, look, you don't have to come up here every time and do the confession. And so I was like, well, I didn't know. I mean, I'm trying to, you said if you felt convicted, I feel convicted. But that was like 3 or 4 weeks in, and he was trying to guide me, and he did a good job. He would always send me back to the scriptures, read the Bible, learn. He gave me some books. It was a process, but in the beginning, for me, it was so simple because it wasn't clouded with like rules, regulations, any of that stuff. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And for me, it was like, I felt like, okay, well, if I sin, the only sins I have is smoking cigarettes and masturbating. So if I can, not smoke cigarettes and not masturbate, I'm holy. I'm good. And that was a non-smoking facility, so we didn't have cigarettes, so that was not
So that knocked that one out.
Yeah, that was easy. That was an easy one. But then, the masturbating stuff, that was hard because that was how I took care of myself. I mean, I was only 24 years old.
I even feel embarrassed hearing this right now.
I'm just trying to be real. I'm just trying to be real. But those were my struggles. And then I explained to my mom what happened to me. And, she did not have a good initial reaction. She thought I had some kind of jailhouse religion. And she was telling me that's, baby, that's things that you don't play with that. And so I was like, no, Mom, you don't understand, this is real. This happened. And so she supported me as best she could, but she didn't really understand what happened to me.
Well, you said nobody believed you.
No. My Meemaw did. My mom's mom. She was overjoyed. She told me that she always knew I was going to be a preacher, and on the phone, I always knew you were going to be a preacher, and I was like, hold up. Nobody's saying that. No, that's not what we're talking about. And then as I started reading the scriptures, I wanted to, it was I couldn't stop reading and devouring the words of Jesus. I just wanted more of it. And then I remembered the guy that told me to read the Gospels. I was reading through the Gospels, and then he also told me, he said, there's 31 days usually in a month, and there's 31 books of Proverbs, so you should read a proverb every day. If it's the first of the month, you should read chapter 1. And I started doing that, and I just remember during that time, I would read through the scriptures, and it would just make me cry. I couldn't stop crying because I just felt so stupid. I've ruined my life. And this was here all the time. And it was kind of like a truth that I'd always been looking for. But I didn't know to look there because the way that, I guess, religion had painted it in such an ugly picture for me that I couldn't. I couldn't. I'm not doing that. I'm not fooling with that. I was so anti anything Jesus. I would have been more likely to become a Buddhist or Muslim or some other, New Age person than I would be to ever become a Jesus follower. So that in and of itself, even now looking back on it, that's a miracle. That was a miracle just because of my mindset, the way I thought, and the way I grew up and just the abuse I experienced in church. There was nothing in church for me
that you wanted.
No.
So you were changed. All that was going on. So I know from the previous part of the story, you're in the jail now, you're waiting for a court date and a sentencing. Is that right?
Yeah.
What was going on with all that?
You start the process over. So now I'm charged. I have an armed robbery charge in Montgomery. It was actually 2 armed robbery charges because we did 2 in Montgomery. You just have to start the process over. So I was appointed a public defender because it still, at that time, it was 20, 30 grand to represent me, and nobody had that kind of money. Montgomery was different from Jefferson County or Bay County where it was. They had real lawyers that had to take a certain amount of pro bono cases. And so I got this lawyer, I can't remember his last name was DeBell DeBar DeLin.
DeBar DeLaban?
I don't know. It was D-Bell D-Bar DeBaden. I could never say his name. I just called him Mr. D. I mean, I didn't know what to call him. But he was a real lawyer. And he was like fighting for me like a real lawyer. But I remember the first time I sat down with him after I'd had this experience with Jesus, like realizing you got to tell him the truth. And I'm like, yeah, but, you know, I had all these stories. You know, it's going to be not good if I tell the truth. But I did. I leveled with him. I told him the truth. And he came back with an offer from the DA of 20 years. And I was like, 20 years? But
20 years in prison?
That was what they wanted to give me in Montgomery. I mean, I had 2 Class A felonies, 2 armed robberies. But just he wanted to help me. And I kind of accepted responsibility. I told the truth. You know, this is what we did. I mean, I probably played off the little drug thing a little more than it was true, you know. The drugs made me do it, kind of thing. But he was a good guy. He met with me at least once a week. He'd come and see me. We'd like try to talk through things. And it was just hard to realize, like, okay, now I got to tell the truth, and I'm stuck, and they could send me to prison for life, you know, for this stuff. And it was very sobering, but at the same time, I had a different, I guess, outlook. Like I had
perspective.
I had hope. I didn't even know why I had hope. Like my mom was like, "Are you crazy?"
Yeah, especially, I mean, good thing you had hope, because right after they tell you have 20 more years, you get sentenced.
That was what I was looking at, 20 years.
Yeah.
But then the craziest thing began to happen in that nasty, dirty, like, unit that I was in. I started reading the Bible. I asked my mom, you know, I need you to get me a real Bible, because they could, like, send you stuff. And I told her it had to be a New International Version. I don't want none of that King James nonsense. I need something I can read. And, you know, she always supported me in that way. Anything I said I needed, like books or Bibles or any of that stuff, she went and got it.
This is the first time you asked for a Bible, though.
Oh, I'd never asked for a Bible.
I was going to say, unless you asked for it to roll it up to smoke it or something.
Well, Bibles are like not a commodity in prison or jail. They're everywhere.
Okay.
Like you got all the denominations, all the people, they're always like dropping off Bibles.
Oh, okay.
So Bibles were not hard to come by. Okay. But I wanted my own Bible.
Yeah.
Because I wanted to study. And she bought me like an NIV Bible, but she bought it with a hard cover, like a hardcover Bible. Mm-hmm. I guess you probably don't know this, but you can't have hardcover books in jail. Okay. You can only have paperbacks. So she brought the hardcover NIV Bible, and they told her I couldn't have it, and she was so distraught that they just ripped the cover off and gave it to me. And then that was my first Bible that I studied.
Do you still have that Bible?
No, I think that one got lost in transit. But it was just a regular Bible. It didn't have a concordance or anything in it. And I was just basically just reading it and devouring it. And I started reading it, and there was a guy that had a mat on the floor next to me. His name was Clarence. He was from Verbena, Alabama. You know, if you're traveling down 65, you pass by Verbena. Yeah. I always think of him when I see that and wonder what happened to him. But he was a little bit older than me, black guy, and just asked me what I was reading. And I said, well, you know, I was kind of a little ashamed because I didn't think anybody would believe me. You know, I'm me. This can't be happening to me. But it was real to me, but it was like I didn't really want to it was hard to like communicate that to other people. And so he was like, I noticed you've been reading. What have you been reading? And I said, well, I had an experience with Jesus, you know, a couple of days ago, and this stuff is for real. And he was like, tell me more. And so I said, I don't know. I had like this presence, and he told me to give up, and he come in. I gave up, he came in, and now I can't stop reading these words. And he started studying with me. And another guy came. He started studying with us. And then another guy, and then another guy. The next thing I knew, you look up and there's 15 of us that are like studying the Bible and like trying. None of us knew what we were doing. Okay. None of us. We didn't know anything about nothing. We were all just, you know, we locked up without hope in the Montgomery County Jail in the nastiest place on earth, you know. And we started studying, and then it was like more people started coming. And this turned into an all-day type of deal. Like, there were guys that would come in, and, you know, I remember there was one guy, Darby. He was like, he grew up in church, but he had been he said he was backslidden, whatever that means. And, he had, just by being there, he decided to recommit his life to Jesus and do all the things. And he knew, like, some stuff he would try to teach us. And then there was a guy named Frank that was from Chicago. He was like one of those guys who's real smart, almost too smart. But he said he was a believer, but that he was also a Muslim. So I was like, okay, well, I mean, how do you connect those two? And then he explained to me, like, Abraham had two sons. One was Ishmael, one was Isaac. The Jews came from Isaac, but the Muslims came from Ishmael. So I was like, oh, I didn't know all that. So I would go and then I started studying the book of Genesis. Like, I need to know who Isaac is and who Ishmael is and all that stuff. And
well, let me pause you. Did these guys that started studying, did they then have the same experience that you had?
Some of them did, like really did. I'm not sure about all of them, but they were all participating in what we were doing, and we didn't even know what we were doing. And then, like, this Darby guy came along and was like, well, God wants you to worship him. And I was like, okay, what does that mean? Okay, what does that mean? And so he was teaching us, like, all the old, like, African-American gospel hymns. And so we were learning these songs, and we would just sing the songs, and, the officers would come in and start doing it with us. And it was crazy. Like, what was happening in that place was crazy.
Because in the jail, there's nothing to do but wait. You said that
in
the last jail.
Or watch TV or
watch
phone.
TV, yeah. But now, which is why you all had time to kind of dig in, and
I felt like I had something to do.
This movement happened, I
Here's
guess.
what I need to do. I need to pursue this Jesus thing. And the only way I knew how to do that was to keep reading. Like, the more of the scriptures that I read, the more I knew I didn't know. So the more it made me want to, like, dig in and learn and grow. I remember the first time I really recognized, like, something is different with you, James K. Jones, was commissary that I got. Because you could spend, like, $30 or whatever. You had, like, it was like once a week you could fill out this little piece of paper and you could order whatever you wanted. I think you could spend $30 a week. But, by that time, I'd been locked up almost 4 years, and I was not really into sharing. Like, I got to get mine. You figure out how to get yours. If I need something with you, I might share with you. But I remember that first commissary, I had ordered a lot of, like food, soups, and Zoom Zooms and Wham Whams is what they called them.
What is Zoom Zooms and Wham Whams?
It just means stuff that you get from the commissary, like stuff that has value.
Like food?
Food. Pretty much, yeah. That was about all you had there. But that first commissary order that I got after that, I felt like the Lord told me to share with people, and I was like, "Share what?" But I did it, and it was like liberating to me. Like, I don't have to be all about me. It was like God was trying to show me how to kill my selfishness. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And I didn't want to do it, but I did it. But I just remember thinking, something's different. This is real. What's happening with you? Because you ain't going to give away your Swiss rolls,
Your Zoom Zooms and Wham Whams.
Well, especially in Montgomery, because they fed you, like, that was probably, besides Jefferson County, the first one I was in, that was probably the worst food we ever had. Like, you pretty much survived off white beans. I mean, that was about all they had there that was worth eating. It was just so, like, clear, like there is something on the inside of me guiding me that is showing me a better way. And what ended up happening over, a couple, 2 or 3 months was, I don't even know what happened. It was just like God just like breathed into that nasty jail cell, and we were like having like revival in there.
So you said one of the guys said you worship and you should sing songs, and he had these old school. Do you remember any of the songs?
Oh, that was Darby. Yeah,
Darby. Yeah,
he was teaching us. He would just teach us songs. I'm gonna lay down my burdens down by the riverside, way down by the riverside. Just all these like old African, and they were like so filled with like faith and hope, and I was just in a good place, even though my circumstances were probably worse than they ever had been. But then, like, when I would call home, like, my mom was like, "You've lost your mind." I mean,
He is officially snapped.
yeah, they thought I was crazy. And then, like, my stepdad, or, well, whatever he was to me, like, he was married to my mom at one time. I don't think they were married at this time. He would, like, get on the phone with me and talk about, well, everybody needs a crutch. So if that's a good crutch for you, just crutch it on. And I'd be like, no, hold up, bro. I don't need a crutch. I don't know what you're talking about. But then, like, I remember having a conversation with my meemaw, my mom's mom, or really grandmother that raised her, that brought me up in the Free Will Baptist Church. I remember, like, telling her, like, just how excited I was and all the things that was going on. And then I remember, like, one of the first times I talked to her after this, like, she was telling me that she was worried about me, because she always worried about me. And so I said, well, meemaw, Jesus said we're not supposed to worry, and that's actually a sin. Like, we're supposed to trust him, and then he's going to work it all out. And at this time, she was close to 90, so she wasn't hearing none of that. And she was like, boy, what are you talking about? Don't worry. And I was like, it's in the Bible. Like, I'll give you the address in the book of Matthew, and you can read it so you don't have to worry no more either. Like, I thought it was so simple. And she was like, boy, what are you talking about? Everybody worries. The preacher worries. Even the preacher worries. And then she said, boy, have you become Catholic? So it's like, what are you talking about? But from her perspective, like, where she was from, the way she grew up out in the country, there were two religions, Baptist and Catholic. And you wanted to be a Baptist because that was the way to heaven. I'm not saying that's true, but that was the mindset.
Right.
And don't be a Catholic because they get to drink and gamble or whatever.
Doesn't that make you want to be a Catholic?
It would have me if I'd had the choice, but at the time, I mean, that was her filter, that was her. So she was asking me, was I a Catholic? And I was like, meemaw, I'm not anything. I'm not a Baptist. I'm not a Catholic. Like, I've had an experience with Jesus, and she didn't really understand that. Like, that was one of my joys of her being able to see that I was okay. And she was like, I can die now, my baby. He'd be all right. So that was good. But what I guess led from that, crazy what was happening there. But, like, the officers took note, and they would come in and pray with us and do all this stuff. And, I didn't know how to pray. I didn't know how to do none of that stuff. I didn't know any of that. None of us did. And I remember there was a guy that slept on the bunk next to me, because, like, eventually you graduate up. When people leave, you can get a bunk. So eventually I got a bunk. His name was James Jones. And he was an old man, or older. No, he was old. He was real old. But he was in there for, like, writing a bad check or something. I met so many characters in Montgomery County. They lock you up for everything in Montgomery. I mean, one guy was in there for, he rented a rental truck and didn't turn it in. And he was arrested for grand theft because he didn't turn it in. So I'm like, dang, why didn't you just turn it in? And there was some story, but anyways, these people would be in there forever. I'm like, at least for me, like, I had, like, a crime that I did. Some of this stuff was so silly, like, it didn't make any sense.
It actually solidifies my fear. I remember in college when I was first getting, like, my credit cards, my Gap credit cards.
Gap.
And I finally, like, confessed, came home because my mom and dad were like, I can feel like something's wrong with you. What is wrong? And I was like, you seem just very, like, stressed and tense. And I thought that if I didn't pay my bill, which I didn't have the money to pay it, my Gap card, my little Gap credit card,
Yeah.
that they were going to take me to prison. I actually really thought that.
Well, lucky for you, you didn't live in Montgomery, Alabama. Pensacola is probably a little more like.
No, my dad laughed, and they were like, they don't take you to prison for not paying. I'm like, oh, thank God.
So you obviously were not paying attention in high school when they taught you civics. Like, that's one of the reasons we broke away from Great Britain, because they had debtors' prisons. But anyways, that's a constitutional thing. But his name was James Jones, and he had a really bad infection, like an abscess tooth or something. And that he was like...
Those are painful.
Yeah, I know he was in pain, but they didn't care. They didn't do anything about it. And I remember, like, reading that Jesus said, you can put your hands on people and pray for them, and he would heal them, and, like, praying for him to be healed. He, like, got better somehow, and then he got out. So I had this, like, thing, and it's the reason why I don't like cats to this day. When I was 17, my cousin Lisa had 2 cats. They were little cats, but she got them from like the neighborhood. Like somebody had some cats and she got them. And anyways, her mom got sick and got swollen in her, like something on her thigh where they thought she had cancer, my Aunt Patsy. And when they took her in to give her surgery, they realized that she had cat scratch fever, which, you know, I'd heard the song cat scratch fever, dur, 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 dur. But that's a real thing. Like if cats don't get their shots or whatever. And they said, you know, we need y'all to go in and like strip the house, bleach everything down because anything could like set that infection off in her again. So we had to get rid of the cats. And Lisa was, you know, a year younger than me, but she was like a sister growing up and I loved her. And they called the dog catchers or the pound or animal control, whatever, to come and get the cats. And she was so distraught. She was like 16. I was like 17. And they came in with like these black gloves on that snatched the cats up. And she was so upset, just so upset. And I said, look, can I just take the cats and just put them in the little cage so she can not be crying? And they were like, yeah, that's fine. So I walked them out to where the cage was. And when the cats saw that they were going in the cage, they turned around and like scratched my face up. No, I mean, it was like, you would think that would be enough. But like 6 months later, my neck started swelling up. Go to the doctor. I mean, I remember telling my mom, like, I feel like there's a worm in my neck. And she was like, no, there's not. It's not a worm in your neck. But it was this hard little thing that just kept growing in my neck. And I kept going to the doctor. They couldn't figure out what it was. So they put me in the hospital. And they decided that I had cancer in my neck. And they were going to cut me open. And like, they didn't tell me that, though. I was young. They told my mom that. But when they cut open my neck, it was the same thing, cat scratch fever. It was it was in a lymph node, and that what they do is they like do something where they drain it. Mm-hmm. But then they told me like be careful around like anything could like set that infection off again. So at this time that had been like 7-8 years later.
Wow!
But I went through 3.5 years of prison in Florida and never had any kind of sickness, which was a miracle because they don't take care of you when you're sick. Like. Don't get sick. Don't go to prison and get sick, especially if it's like some kind of condition because they'll like amputate your neck or something. But
that would be the end.
My neck started swelling up. And I knew the feeling. It was the same feeling I had then, and it scared me. I was so scared, and I didn't want to like tell the people because they were mean. The medical people, they were mean. They always thought you were faking. Right. You were making up stuff. But I made an appointment. I went and I told them, I had this. I still have the scar on my neck. You can see where I got operated on. They just like gave me some Tylenol and just told me to shut up. So I was scared, and this was like my first like answered prayer, like where I just know that God answered my prayer. So I went to this brother that was a little bit older than me, and I just said, I'm scared. Like, I don't want this to come back and be in jail, and then, I don't know what could happen to me. And so he, like, grabbed my hands, and he said, the scripture says where 2 or 3, agree. Like, God is in the midst. He'll take care of us. So we prayed, and I believed, he believed, and I believed, he believed, all the things. Everything the formula said. And I thought I should be instantly healed. Because that's what happened. And that's what happened when Jesus touched on you. I mean, you just was better.
Touched on you.
But I wasn't better. And it was almost like I was worse. And then it wasn't 2 hours later. This James Jones had left. He was gone. They said, they called my name for med call. And they handed me a pill. And it was penicillin. And the James Jones that was there had an abscessed tooth. And I was trying to explain that it wasn't me. Like, that wasn't my medicine. And they were like,
that James Jones.
No, but the guy like got like you're James Jones. Like, he could see my name tag. And they would make you take your medicine in front of them. Like, you couldn't just like walk off with your medicine. It was like some kind of control. They controlled everything you did. Mm-hmm. And I took my penicillin, and then I took it again the next morning, the next night. And then like 2 days later, I was better. But it was like I realized...
It wasn't even medicine for you.
It wasn't my medicine. But it was penicillin for James Jones, who had an abscessed tooth, who got out. But it would like did something for me. It was like, okay, everything don't have to be like ooty booty, ooh, all that stuff. Like, God was taking care of me. I needed some penicillin to knock that out, and it knocked it out. And I don't think I've ever had a problem with that since then. But it was like solidified for me, like this whole like following Jesus, praying, spiritual thing. Don't always have to be like ooty booty, like ooh ah.
Or when you say ooty booty, I think you mean, and correct me if I'm wrong, some like emotional high that happens immediately.
Or just like an immediate miracle. And I don't mean, I have seen miracles. I've seen God perform miracles. But in my life, more often than not, it was a process, something like that, where I knew, okay, he's doing this. I'm going to be fine. I just need to trust him and everything's going to be beautiful. And it was. And whatever was in my neck got knocked out. They didn't help me. The medical people there in Montgomery County, they didn't care to help me. But Jesus saw where I was. And there was something about that was so, I guess, like comforting to me to know, you know, I'm here. I'm locked up. I don't have my family. But God knows where I am. And he's taking care of me. And he did. And I never really lost that after that. I think for me, like that part of it, just like being, I guess, like known and taken care of. And he was taking care of me. And then in the meantime, you know, what was happening in that county jail, I still to this day, I've never seen anything like that. I mean, and at this time now, I'm 24, 25 years in.
Well, if you could sum it up, what you say you've never seen anything like it, what was it? I mean, you say a revival, but like, I mean.
It was like a group of 50, 60 men that had no hope, that were stuck in like the worst conditions, you know, like nothing was going to get any better, nothing was going to change, and somehow that God chose to like come down to us and reach into us and take us somewhere different. And it was amazing. I mean, even the officers, it was like, you know, whatever's going on here, this is not like normal Montgomery County jail life. It was, and I mean, there wasn't nobody could take any credit for it because none of us know what we were doing. I mean, we didn't.
It's almost like like from what you described, there was just like a breath of life that was breathed into there.
It was, and it was. I believe it changed all of us. I mean, I know it changed me. It got me ready for what was next, and I had a guy that came through there that had been through some kind of program. It was called Canaan Land outside of Montgomery. And it was some kind of faith-based like program. And I remember him telling me, you know, you can go there instead of going to prison. So I was like, ooh, I'd rather go there than the prison. And, you know, like talking to my lawyer and all that stuff. And then him telling me, how did he tell me? He said, okay, this is what we do. The scripture says if you believe you receive, you have what you say. So we pray one time, you believe you receive, and then you just say you have it. And so I was like, okay, like that sounds like something I would be interested in. I mean, if that's all it is to it, I mean, that would definitely be something, you know, I believe, I receive, and then I just say, okay.
Easy enough.
So he like grabbed a hold of me and wanted to do this prayer thing. And then we believed that we received when we prayed, and then we had what we say, so we just say it. So he kept saying, you're going to Canaan Land. James is going to Canaan Land. And, of course, I never went to Canaan Land. But I remember, like, getting, like, 2 or 3 weeks into that, and, like, I think you're missing, like, the thing. Like, that's not – I'm going to prison. So, long story short, they offered me 20 years in Montgomery.
Offered you? I like how you said that.
Well, no, like, in cases like that, you don't want to go to trial because you're already guilty. If you go to trial, like if they offer you 20 years, if you go to trial and lose, it's like a punishment in the criminal justice system. So if you go to trial and lose, that means you put them through a trial. They had to pick 12 jurors and take all this time, spend all this money. So you ain't going to get 20 years. You're going to get at least double that. So if I'd have went to trial and lost, I might have got life in prison. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, that's a reality. And plus for me, going to trial was not an option because I was guilty. I mean, guilty. There's no reason to try to go. I mean, I couldn't win anyways. So my lawyer was real troubled. He was a believer, and it was like he knew I was too. It was weird. Like he knew, like he was like in my corner. He was for me. He was fighting for me. And he came back with a 10-year sentence. Like they're offering you two 10-year sentences. They'll run them concurrent, which means like I don't have to serve 10 and then serve another 10. I would serve one 10-year sentence, and they would give me credit for time served for all the time I did in Florida, which to me meant I'm going home next Wednesday because of good time and all that kind of stuff. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So we went to court. You don't have a guarantee when you go, but you have to go and you have to plead guilty, and then you just roll the dice. And then when you're getting sentenced, you can have like character witnesses. And I remember my mom came and a couple other people, but my Aunt Sue got up there and was just saying, how I messed up my life and I made a mistake, and it'd be great if I could have another chance. And then she just like started squalling, and she was like, "Judge, he got saved. He got saved, Judge. He's saved. He's saved." And so I was like, all right, well, if that will make him do anything different, that'd be great. But if it won't, then that was not necessary to say all that. But he ended up giving me 10 years sentence and then credit for time served for my time in Florida, which meant I got almost 4 years time served, which meant, I was only looking at the most, I was looking at 6 years. So here I was. That process was not quite as long as it was in Florida. When I was in Florida, it took me a whole year to go to prison.
Yeah.
This took me, I think I was in prison by Thanksgiving. So it started like July, August, September, October, November. I was in prison by Thanksgiving. The difference for me this time was I was almost excited to go to prison. Like, just get me out of county jail. I got this Jesus thing going on. God's got a plan for my life. I'm ready. Let's do it. I'm not scared. He already performed a miracle in them not giving me 20 years. Because they could have given me like 20 years consecutive, which would have been 40 years. And I was guilty. They had the evidence. They had everything they needed to know. And then, again, I'll say I couldn't lie anymore. So it was a weird, like, helpless feeling. Like you can't even like make up something to defend yourself, to like deflect the punishment.
What is it? You were just ready to pay the fiddler. Is that what
Yeah.
the saying was?
Yeah, if you're going to dance, you got to pay the fiddler.
Yeah.
So I was getting ready to go to prison in Alabama, and I guess that probably need to be where we need to end this one.
Yeah.
During that process, I had a case in Shelby County. I had to go up to Shelby County. I think I stayed in Shelby County overnight to get that case going up there. It was another armed robbery. The Shelby County jail was way different than Montgomery County. It was, all jails are depressing, but this one was like a no-contact jail. It was like they did everything through glass, like they handed you stuff through these little cubbies, and you felt like you were at Disney. Remember at Disney World, you'd ride by and you see the little people sitting in their houses and like going up Space Mountain? Mm-hmm. You kind of felt like that, like the police would come by looking at you. And then they would give you your food, and you would watch TV, and it was just, jail life sucks. It sucks. Like it's just hard time. But I was ready to go, and ready for what was next. And somehow I was like filled with faith, and I was not hopeless. I really wasn't even discouraged, which troubled like my mom and my granny and like people that are close to me. Like, you got to at least be bothered. And I'm like, no, you don't understand. You don't understand. You don't understand what I got on the inside. So the in part of 1996, headed off to prison in Alabama. And I guess that would be where we start the next one.
Yeah, because things get more dramatic, right?
Not right away. Remember, in Florida, I went to Lake Butler, which was the North Florida Reception Center. Mm-hmm. That was one of 3 in the state of Florida, and that was the roughest one to go to. That was the one where they beat you down, break you down, do all that stuff. In Alabama, there's only one. It's Kilby Correctional Facility. It's a reception center. It's outside of Montgomery. It's the only one in Alabama, and it is not that intense. It's almost like watching one of those old westerns where you see the land that time forgot, and you're going back 50 years. It was kind of like that. And it was prison, but it wasn't weren't trying to beat you down, or I mean, they made sure that you were submissive. But I would soon find out that not only were county jails not the same in Alabama as they were in Florida, but prison was not either. It was a totally different experience. But we'll get into that in the next one. Good things coming.
Stay tuned.
Well, thank you guys so much for tuning in to Straight Out of Prison podcast. I guess we would title this one Saved. This was my first couple of months of following Jesus and trying to navigate through that, even though I didn't know what I was doing, and just doggedly determined that I was not going to be a church person or a religious person. But whatever I had on the inside of me was real, and I wanted to keep following and learning and growing. And I did.
That's awesome.
All right, we'll see you next time. Thanks so much.
Bye.
Hey guys, thanks so much for tuning in to the Straight Out of Prison podcast. For more exclusive content, head over to our website, timjones.co/podcast.
Yes, you can subscribe by clicking on the Become a Patron button, and that's going to get you access to our For Real Reel, which is very different than the highlight
not the
reel.
highlight reel, it's
Some
the real
very
deal.
juicy content there.
Good stuff. Or you can look us up on Facebook and Instagram, Straight Out of Prison Podcast.
Yes, that takes the story to a whole new level where you can see some of the people that James talks about in his story and see some of the places that he's been. I've been loving it, and you will too.
Prison recipes.
Yeah, all the things.
Good stuff. We'll see you soon, guys.
Thanks,
videos,
bye.
please hit the like button and subscribe. If you never want to miss a recipe or anything I do, hit the little bell and you'll get notifications.